Good afternoon, Evil, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. Nathaniel stepped into the yawning mouth of Whitaker's antiquarian books once more, the bell above the door tolling a dirge that reverberated through every shelf and crate. He held the cursed tome against his chest as if it were beating with its own unholy pulse. Inside, the shop yawned wider than memory, owls stretched into a vaulted darkness, and the single lamp in the alcove flickered like a dying heartbeat. The air smelled of damp leather and rot. Somewhere high above, a loose floorboard groaned, a single droplet of something dark splashed onto the floor at his feet. He lit his candle and advanced toward the alcove where Evangeline's presence had first revealed itself. Each step seemed to echo twice, once in the world of wood and dust, then again in some distant realm beyond the book's binding. The lamp's glow cast crooked shadows that skittered across the shelves like pale fingers beckoning him deeper. He kept his eyes fixed ahead, though he could feel movement in its periphery. Books sliding from shelves, their pages turning as though flipped by invisible hands, a low murmur of voices chanting his name in a dozen dialects. Reaching the alcove, he found the table bare except for a single fragment of parchment, a map drawn with trembling lines depicting the shop's layouts stitched with runes of warding. At its center lay a circle, invisible, already worn thin by time but still holding. Around it, tiny glyphs warned, "Here the spirit may open her eye, here the veils grow thin." He recognized that circle, the very spot where he had first seen her silhouette in the mirror. His palms sweat as he pressed the map between pages of the book. A harsh whisper crackled behind him, "You should not have come back." Nathaniel spun, candle shaking. No one was there, but the air convulsed with a sorrow so deep it rattled his bones. He drew himself up and spoke aloud, voice cracking, "I have come to end this." A slow, wet scraping came from the back of the alcove. He edged forward. There, folded into the shadows, was Evangeline, her body translucent, her hollow eyes burning with an ancient grief. Her lips peeled back in something like a grin. "End, me," she hissed, voice like dry leaves. "Or bind me again?" Nathaniel swallowed. "Both if I can." She drifted closer, her form leaving icy trails on the wood planks. "Then you must read the final words. You must finish the tale." He nodded, heart pounding. The book was open on the table before him. Its pages had turned themselves to the last chapter where the binding spell lay waiting. But now the text was smudged, half erased. He laid his thumb on the faded letters, willing the ink to return. A tendril of darkness slithered from the spine, wrapping around his wrist. Pain flared, but he would not flinch. "Read," Evangeline urged, voice melting between coaxing and command. "Read, so I may see the world." He inhaled, reciting the archaic words as best he could remember. "By blood and ink, by thread and quill, I seal your grief, I bind your will. No second breath, no flicker bright remain within this silent night." At once, the shadows surged. The lamp blazed to life, scorching brilliance that revealed the shop transformed. Shelves toppled, their tomes flying open in a storm of pages, dust and motes spun in the light like a tornado of memories. Evangeline shrieked, a sound that cracked the air like glass. She tried to recoil, but the tendrils of darkness tightened, drawing her toward the circle beneath the table. Nathaniel's candle guttered, then flared. Across the floor, he spelled out the runic words from the map, each step tracing a sigil in his own blood. At the final syllable, he pressed the candle down, dribbling wax where the iron ink runes intersected. A pulse shook the floor, the circle glowed faintly, binding her. Her scream rose to a white-hot pitch. The walls themselves seemed to groan as though the building fought against the capture. Books tumbled in great heaps, a chandelier swung so violently that candles rained down like fireflies extinguishing mid-flight. Through the chaos, Nathaniel stood firm, repeating the last line of the incantation. Forever bound to written fate, beyond the veil, beyond the gate. With that final word, the storm of pages stilled. The lamp's flame steadied. Dust settled on the table. And where Evangeline had been, there was nothing but the open page, blank, pristine, as though hungry for new text. The leather cover of the cursed volume snapped shut on its own, the sound like a tomb ceiling. Nathaniel fell to his knees, breath heaving. The air was still. No whispering, no murmur of wings, no flicker of movement. The alcove was a quiet tomb once more. He reached out with trembling fingers and touched the book. Its surface was cold, all trace of the pulsing veins had vanished. He dared to open it, but only to the first page. The iron ink letters were gone, replaced with a simple inscription. "Here ends the story." He closed the book gently as one might tuck a child into bed and held it against his chest. A sense of finality pressed upon him, heavier than any terror he had faced. Outside, the bell hummed softly as the wind sighed through the broken windows. Somewhere, a floorboard shifted. He rose, limping from a twisted ankle, and made for the door. On the threshold, he paused. The path back to the street lay smooth and untroubled under the pale moonlight. He glanced once more at the lamplit aisles, at the silent shelves. Then he crossed outside. The night air tasted of rain yet to fall. He exhaled, a laugh half formed on his lips, but it died in his throat. The leather-bound tome still throbbed softly against his coat, and in the hush, Nathaniel could have sworn he heard a soft rustle like a page turning somewhere far below. He continued down the street, the book tucked between his arm and side. The first raindrops splattered onto the pavement. In their echoes he heard, faint but unmistakable, a whisper of a voice. "Thank you and farewell." Nathaniel paused, heart hammering. The wind carried the words away, dissolving them into the night. He closed his eyes, steeling himself against any lingering dread. Then, with a final glance back at Whitaker's windows, dark, empty, indifferent, he walked on. But the shadows in the alleys seemed to lengthen, and the pages within the book quivered, hungry for another tale. Nathaniel pressed his coat tighter, the book's leather whispering secrets he had yet to unravel. The end had come, but the story, as he knew too well, never truly ends. Nathaniel's boots thudded against the warped wooden floor as he raced from Whitaker's antiquarian books, the cursed volume pressed like a beating heart beneath his coat. Outside, the October wind gnawed at his collar, scattering brittle leaves across the cracked pavement. He leaned against the shop's facade to catch his breath. The bell above the door had stilled, yet he could almost hear it echoing in his ears as though he still dwelled inside. He forced his shaking hands to open the book. The cover had lost its dull sheen, the steel-gray leather now seemed alive, veins of ink pulsing beneath the surface. He cracked it open to the first unfolded leaf. The iron ink letters resembled the jagged roots of a dead tree, and as he stared, the words seemed to twist. "Beware the binding, for it hungers. Beware the reader, for he is marked." Nathaniel snapped the book shut. The words had not been there moments before. His skin crawled as he pressed the volume flat against his chest and forced himself to walk. He could not stay here. If Evangeline had even a sliver of the book's power, she would escape the shop's walls and slip into the world like mist. The streetlights, dim and flickering, illuminated Victorian facades that leaned toward each other like old conspirators. He wrapped his coat tighter against the chill, glancing over his shoulder. In the window of the bookstore, he thought he saw a sliver of pale motion, a shadow that fluttered and faded. He shook his head. It had to be a trick of the light. 2 blocks later, he ducked into an alley to gather his thoughts. Rusted bins reeked of rot, and the moonlight offered no comfort. He opened the book again, once, twice, each time scanning the margins for clues. On page 7, as though burned in red, he found a poem. Evangeline, born of grief, wrapped in sorrow's silent veil. Her voice a dirge beneath the leaf. Her cry a blade that tears the veil. Beneath the verse, a hurried note, only blood answers the call. His pulse pounded. Could the book demand sacrifice? He wiped sweat from his brow, trying to steady his racing mind. Something skittered behind the bins. He aimed his flashlight, and its beam landed on a rat? No. A pale hand, slender as a bird's wing, protruding from a gap in the brick. A soft, sorrowful moan drifted through the alley. "Evangeline," Nathaniel whispered, voice cracking. The hand withdrew into the wall, dragging something dark behind it. Nathaniel's step faltered. He took a deep breath and forced himself forward toward the iron gate at the alley's end. Each footstep echoed like a drumbeat. As he passed beneath the gateway, the wind stilled. The night held its breath. He emerged onto a silent street. The book in his hands felt impossibly heavy. He dared not open it again, but he needed direction. The margins on the next pages were blank. Then, as he turned to head home, the alley wall behind him rippled as if the bricks were water disturbed by a stone. A pale face emerged. Hollow eyes, lips parted, hair like wet lace clinging to her skull. Nathaniel stumbled back, colliding with the book against his ribs. The pages fanned open. "Release me." The command etched itself across the page in letters of glinting silver. He staggered. He raised a hand to his throat, as if the words had burned there. The ghost's voice, distant and hollow, whispered, "Release me." He yanked the book shut again and raced for his apartment 3 blocks away. The street lamps flickered, and he obeyed the patches of light as though they were milestones guiding him toward safety. Behind him, somewhere in the labyrinth of alleyways and silent houses, a soft keening followed, the rattling lament of a trapped soul. Inside his flat, the lock clicked shut behind him. He leaned the book against the door. The volume pulsed, as if alive, and the lamp in the hallway dimmed. He swallowed hard, feeling Evangeline's presence pressing against the thin barrier of wood. He could no longer doubt. The ghost would not rest until she roamed free, until she fed again on fear and sorrow. He dared not touch the phone. Any call might draw her near, her mournful whisper slicing through the lines. Instead, he lit every candle in the cramped living room, their trembling flames casting long shadows. On the coffee table lay an old journal he'd found among his grandfather's things, filled with arcane symbols. He flipped it open to a page marked Containment Rites. The scrawled handwriting warned, "Inscribe the sealing circle with the phantom's true name, written in vow blood, beneath the moon's sorrow." Nathaniel closed his eyes. Vow blood. The words tasted of iron. He knew what it meant. His hand hovered over the page. Below the text was a stain, dark and circular, as though someone had pricked a finger there long ago. A sudden crash rattled the window panes. He spun. Candles guttered, their flames bending away from the cold reality in the glass. There, pressed against the nearest pane, was a face, Evangeline's face, eyes ablaze with longing, her lips parted in a silent plea. He could see her ribcage beneath the tattered gown, ribs protruding like pale yew branches. She mouthed a word, help or free. He could not tell. His heart screamed. The journal slipped from his fingers, slamming onto the wooden floor. He staggered backward, nearly tripping over a scattering of old books. The candles flared and then extinguished, flicking out one by one until he stood in darkness. A soft rustle came from the door where the cursed volume leaned. The bell at the door chimed inside his mind. Nathaniel clenched his fists, gathering will against despair. He had to act, to complete the rite, or Evangeline would shatter the barrier and step into the room, her skeletal fingers brushing his cheek. He forced himself to light a single candle, its glow timid but defiant. Kneeling, he picked up the journal. He read aloud the incantation, voice trembling. By ink and blood, by book and word, I bind thee back to silent page. Flesh of mine shall seal thy cage. He pressed the journal flat on the floor and pricked his thumb with a rusted safety pin. A single droplet of ruby welled up. He hesitated, then let it fall onto the spiral binding, where the words seemed to absorb the blood, darkening to a richer shade. The room quivered, and somewhere a distant scream echoed, as though a door slammed shut in another realm. The candle flickered violently, and for a moment Nathaniel glimpsed the shelves of Whitaker's shop, the dusty lamp, the hunched shadow in the corner. Then the vision vanished. He dared to exhale, but in the embers of the candle's light, the journal's pages flickered, and new words appeared in spidery script. You have bound a fragment, not the whole. She hungers still. His blood ran cold. The ghost was not defeated, only stalled. He rose, wincing at the pain in his thumb, and stared at the book leaning against the door. It waited, patient and ravenous. Nathaniel knew that to finish the task, he must return to the source. Whitaker's shop, that labyrinth of shelves and shadows, to the very alcove where Evangeline first took shape. There, the binding could be reversed or the portal flung wide. He gripped the cursed tome, heart pounding, resolve hardening like steel. Outside, the wind carried a low, lamenting wail. Nathaniel stepped into the corridor of night, the candle's dying light clasped in one hand and the book in the other, knowing the real horror lay ahead, and that each step drew him closer to the moment when the ghost would either be forever contained or finally unleashed. Thank you very much and see you all in the next video.